and we could have went 10 or 20 or 30 biggest mistakes because there's so many mistakes that landlords make, and we're hoping to uncover them to help you as a landlord or property manager to prevent yourself running into these same mistakes. I'm here with Garnet Correa, the owner and operator, co-owner of AG Property Services, a very affluent, very successful property management group here in Edmonton. Garnet, how you doing?
Very good, Kelvin. Excited to be here.
Property managers do not have it easy. If you want to see some of the worst Google ratings in like the history of Google ratings, I swear to God, property managers always have the worst because you're either pissing off the tenant or you're either pissing off the landlord that hired you. How do you do it, and how do you balance that relationship? Because it's difficult to achieve the win-win in all scenarios.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, it comes down to just, I'd say number one is communication and open communication, just explaining things to both sides. Because yeah, again, when some tenants are not happy with, when an owner doesn't want to do some cosmetic renovations or things that they don't think are functionally working, it's always tough, like you said, just trying to mitigate and trying to balance both sides so that there is a win-win.
Yeah. Yeah. Not a lot of people can do property management. And if property management's one of the main reasons why you as an investor are avoiding buy and holds, that's where you hire it out. That's where you get professionals that have systems, plans in place to allow for any scenario that might take on, right? And I do think that, here in Alberta, property managers probably have it, would you say, slightly easier to be able to have more freedom than if you were in Ontario or BC?
I would agree with that. Yeah.
Why do we have it easier in Alberta?
I'd say one of them obviously is just our legal system and the process. I mean, when we were out in Ontario for a conference a few months back, we were just chatting with some of the investors there, and some guys are talking about trying to evict their tenants for 12 or 18 months, right? So you got to imagine tenants that's not paying rent, you're bleeding every month. You're trying to scramble and find out how you're going to be paying these mortgages. But then on top of that, after the tenant leaves, you probably have a whole whack of renovations and repairs you've got to take care of, right? Whereas in Alberta here, we're in, we have an architect's hearing within 3 to 4 weeks. So it's obviously just the turnaround time is just a lot quicker here.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So many different advantages, and you've just skimmed the surface on it. Garnet, I'll get you to straighten your video just so you're like right in the middle.
Sure.
Just come over a little bit.
That better?
No. There we go. That's better. That's better. Much better. Yeah. Very good. So Garnet, what are the top five? Let's start with number one. What's number one mistake that landlords make when it comes to property management?
Well, Calvin, you're going to like this one. Number one, I'd say, is when owners are not working with an investor-focused realtor. I'd say that's the first number one problem, because it's really important that you're working with someone that understands markets, current market conditions, areas within that city and the market that you're in. You've got a great city map of kind of the A, B, C, D areas of the city. So if you haven't connected with Kelvin and his team about that, definitely reach out to them. They can send you a map kind of Edmonton, because it's really well done. And again, the part of the reason why that's just so important is you want to make sure that you're lining up your goals as an investor, right? I mean, what are the four things that you look at? You're looking at for appreciation, looking for cash flow. What were the other ones? The other two that you had there?
Tenant profile and vacancy.
That's
and
right.
So, yeah, one of the exercises that we do is you put those in order of what's most important to you to least important, and that will help guide us into locations that will best suit your goals. And I think, to your point, I actually would have never guessed the number one that you picked, but it makes actually a lot of sense, because think about how hard you have it, Garnet, is where they come in and they expect that they're going to get the same result or this type of result in this location and type of property they purchased with the strategy they decided, and they were never set up for success in the beginning. I mean, how do you even accomplish what their expectations are if they didn't purchase in the right location based on their goals, the right type of property to allow them for a certain type of cash flow? And sometimes you could be held in a really tough position. I mean, that just shows how much harder it actually is.
It does.
we make your life easier if we're purchasing in an area where it's like, hey, we can expect roughly this amount of cash flow, this amount of vacancy, rents are already approved by the property manager prior to you purchasing, and maybe even more conservative, knowing that the rents might be going through a little bit of a contraction here in the later half of this year. And then you're ending up with actually being able to produce the results they expect, as opposed to them getting into a property and then just being pissed off at you and thinking that you're the problem when they never actually set themselves up for success in the first place.
That's exactly it. And I mean, and not to say, I mean, again, we manage lots of properties in those C and D areas because, again, often the cash flow is a little bit better in those areas. And I got some investors that they'll only buy in D areas because they're just heavy into cash flow. They want to hold these things long term for 15, 20 years. So they're okay with that. But you just got to understand that, the way to really generate wealth is obviously, there's cash flow, there's the mortgage buy down, but then also that appreciation, right? So some of these areas in the D areas, and again, even C areas sometimes become C plus or maybe a B minus over time. And we're seeing a lot of that on the west side of the city with a lot of development, right? Where a lot of guys are looking at the long term play with the LRT and everything that's coming in and on these infills. But again, those are still kind of the C areas, I would say, or C plus. But yeah, these D areas, I mean, some of these guys have held them for 10, 15 years and whatever they paid for it, they're kind of selling for that in, 7 or 10 years down the road, which is kind of unfortunate. But again, they're just banking on, maybe they got higher cash flow and they're okay with that. And then obviously just the mortgage buy down too, of course, right?
Definitely, definitely. Okay, so we got number one. What's number two?
So number two, so when you're looking at deals, underwriting them, or at least to put an offer in and you're in the conditional phase, making sure you've got a good team when it comes to inspectors and trades, I would say. So that will really help you be able to come up and underwrite this deal. And it'll actually help you, could actually end up saving you thousands of dollars in negotiations, right? Because your inspector was good. He was really thorough, was able to find things with the building, make you aware of potential things that you need to budget for in the future. Make sure you've got money set aside for those capital expenditures, and so you don't have any surprise where you buy the building and it's like, oh, now I've got to do the roof on this thing. I wasn't aware that there's a leak, and this could be a $70,000 or $80,000 on this roof, right? And you got to replace it. So yeah, making sure you have those, a good inspector, and then obviously trades too that you rely on, right? Do you have a good plumber or handyman, electrician, things they can give you pricing on some of these issues and do the walkthroughs with you, to really give you an idea so you can create a budget. Because again, not no one wants to wake up and be a slumlord, but that happens because of just poor planning, and they just didn't have things set aside to plan for these repairs and maintenance and things like that, right?
And so number one and number two definitely fall within the poor planning or poor due diligence that's administered by the buyer entering into this purchase. And getting into the wrong purchase can be more expensive than not getting into it at all. And you talked about, another common trend is having the right team, not only with the agent or whoever's going to be representing you, in ensuring that there's some level of confidence of what you're getting into and it does relate back to your goals. But also, again, are you getting, a contractor in there, your team members, so they're able to spot some of the larger capital expenditures, maintenance items, so then you have less surprises. What's number three?
Number three is, of course, vacancies. So those can be expensive. And again, this also kind of comes back to buying in the right area, right? I mean, again, we're going to see a lot less turnover or, more stable tenants, I would say, in those A and B areas versus, again, in the C and D areas, you're going to see a little bit more transit people, or, sometimes in these buildings, unfortunately, the reality is your good tenants end up often leaving those C or D areas because, they've maybe got better employment, or their relationship status has changed and now they're making a jump into maybe a better area, or, they want to start a family, and, being in that C or D area is just not what where they want to be, right? Being proactive with vacancies. So for us, like our lease renewal notices, we like to get those out usually about 60 days before, so we can have a conversation. If your costs have gone up, having an honest conversation with the tenant, saying, hey, proper tax, insurance, you just renewed the mortgage, it's gone out X amount, but again, just having that open conversation with them, explain to the tenants, here's the reality of it. You know, personally, I like to keep my rents up. I got good tenants in there. I'm okay with